But what I want to show you in this presentation is that the leaders of the evolution revolution really did not have good science to back up their claims. We saw last time that after Descartes got his revelation from the angel of truth, that things have always been the same from the beginning of creation, Charles Lyell, the British attorney / geologist, took Descartes' false principle and developed the principle from that the present is the key to the past. And since Lyell couldn't see global floods happening, and he hadn't heard of one in recent times, he concluded that it never could have happened because the present is the key to the past. And he came up with a way of explaining the sedimentary rocks all over the earth in terms of slow and gradual processes over millions of years. But there's one big problem with that, leaving aside the fact that it's fundamentally wrong to begin with. And that is, from the perspective of geology, Lyell left out of account the most important factor in sedimentology, in the laying down of sediments which form sedimentary rocks. And that is moving currents of water. Because in the real world, as opposed to the imaginary world of evolution, most sediments are laid down by moving currents of water, and therefore they are deposited in very different ways from what Lyell imagined was normally the case. Lyell had no facilities for doing real experimental research in his field, but for decades we have had such facilities where scientists can do real science. There are laboratories like this one at Colorado State University where sedimentologists have flumes where they can feed water and different kinds of sediment and watch how the sediments are deposited. This is real science that Lyell and Darwin could not do. And what we've learned from this real science is that sediments do not normally settle gradually out of still water in the real world. They are normally deposited by moving water, and sediments are sorted according to their physical characteristics and deposited laterally and vertically at the same time. So let's imagine there's a big flood, not a global flood, just a river overflows its banks, and you have a large amount of sediment deposited. Well, it's going to be deposited like this, and notice the sediments at the far corner are being deposited at the same time as the sediments in the upper corner over here. And yet when this is all over with and the sediments harden, if Charles Lyell takes a walk in the country, he's going to imagine that the sediments at the top of the formation were formed very recently in comparison with the ones at the bottom, when in reality they were formed at exactly the same time. This is a section of the Grand Canyon called the Tonto Group, which, according to the standard explanation, took millions of years to form. But in a peer-reviewed journal article, some scientists examined the sediments that make up this part of the Grand Canyon, and what they found is that these sediments were deposited by an enormous body of water as it moved across what is now the southwestern United States. And you can tell from the way the sediments were laid down that this happened very, very fast. In fact, it happened in days or weeks, but not in millions of years. So the reality is that real science supports what Moses tells us in Genesis about a global flood.